Good evening, everybody. I hope you can see and hear me okay. You are very welcome back to another episode of Discover Your Future in DCU. And this week, I'm very excited to be hosting the biology webinar. So if you are maybe a 4th, 5th, 6th year student, even a parent, teacher, guidance counsellor, and you have an interest in biology, you could be studying it at the minute in secondary school and you want to continue it on to 3rd level. Maybe you don't study it at all at the minute, but it is still something you're interested in. Today, we will be able to give you a lot of insight into biology at DCU. So just before we get started, I will highlight the Q&A function that is at the bottom of your Zoom screen at the minute. If you have any questions at all throughout the webinar, whether you want to ask about specific modules, entry requirements, career prospects, internships, anything like that, please pop your question into the Q&A box and we will be more than happy to answer your question. My name is Sinead McCrohan. I work in student recruitment and I am going to be hosting this panel discussion. But you don't really want to be hearing from me. You want to be hearing from our fantastic panelists that we have lined up for today's session. So each week we want to bring you as many stories and voices and as many experiences as possible so that you can make a great choice about going to university. So we are incorporating students, graduates and academic staff members to help you make that decision today. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome our wonderful panel onto the call and I'm going to add them in one by one so that you can see them coming onto the screen and then we will get started. So as our current student representative, I am going to welcome Jack Robin into the call, who is a final year genetics and cell biology student in DCU. Jack, the invitation's on the way to promote you to a panelist. You're more than welcome to turn on your camera and your microphone when you enter. Next up, we have a very successful graduate we're going to chat to, Sarah Cartland, who studied genetics and cell biology in DCU and is currently a PhD student in DCU as well. So I'm sure Sarah will tell us lots about the work that she's doing and the research that she's undertaking at the minute. Hi guys, how are you? Next, we're going to bring in Dr. Keith Rockford, who is an assistant professor in biomedical science in DCU. Keith, you are very welcome as I add you in. Perfect. Hey guys, how are you? We're almost there, halfway through our panel. Next up, I will welcome Dr. Greg Foley, who is an associate professor and is the program chair of the BSc in biotechnology in DCU and heavily involved in DCU Futures. Greg, you're very welcome. Hi Keith, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Almost there. And finally, last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Tim Downing, who is an assistant professor in genomics at the DCU School of Biotechnology. And Tim, you are very welcome as our final panelist to add to the call. And we almost have everybody. Fantastic. Sometimes that bit stresses me out, but it actually was plain sailing today. Thank you very much. Tim, you're very welcome.
Thanks, Sinead. Nice to be here.
And our whole panel, thank you very much for taking the time out of your Thursday evening, just before our lovely Easter break, if you are getting one. So that is very much appreciated. We have a lot of students in the call at the minute who I'm sure are very excited to learn more about biology. And if you can cast your minds back to maybe when you were making a decision about what you'd like to do in 3rd level, that's where we want your head to be in terms of this conversation today. So we might start off kind of zooming out and we can slowly get kind of closer into specific modules and things like that. But if I was a student, in 6th year tuning in and I have an interest in biology, what sort of options are there for DCU? Tim, would you like to take this, or maybe any of our academics want to step in and kind of talk about our undergrad offerings in DCU?
Sure, I'll start and the others can join in. Well, we have 3 main offerings now. Our first degree was BSc in biotechnology, and our second one is a degree in genetics and cell biology. And then this year, next September, we're launching our new bioprocessing degree, which is like biotechnology, but with a higher level of engineering. And those 3 degrees give a wide range of offerings with different degrees of bioengineering, but also bringing in more molecular biology and cell biology.
Very good. So there's a lot of different options, yeah.
So Greg is the chair of the new bioprocessing degree, so maybe he can comment more on that.
Yeah, I'm chair of a lot of things these days.
Too many chairs.
I'm going to throw a cat amongst the pigeons and say I'm not actually a biologist at all. I'm actually a chemical engineer. And I'm supposed to give you some sense, the students out there, as to how we view biotechnology and even more so how we view bioprocessing. I'll say one word, and that's AstraZeneca. And I think you're all probably familiar with the fact that there's been a lot of issues around the AstraZeneca vaccine, and we haven't been getting as many doses as we were hoping to. And a lot of that is down to the politics between Britain and the EU and what have you. But an awful lot of it is down to the fact that it's one thing to produce a thing like a vaccine or a drug of any kind in the lab, to give 10 doses to a few people for a little research study. But then to produce tens of, even hundreds of millions of doses of those drugs, particularly vaccines at the moment, is what we call a bioprocessing challenge. So it's no longer a purely biological problem. So no matter how fantastic your vaccine is and how much nice genetics or whatever you've done or immunology, if you can't produce lots of it for human beings, well, then it's of very little benefit. And our biotech degree program really dates back to the 1980s, and it was unique in that we tried to address this problem of how to make biological compounds on a very large scale. So the original biotech degree involved both the fundamental biology subjects like microbiology, biochemistry, immunology, all of those kind of things, but also a type of engineering that I like to call biochemical engineering. It's quite a molecular form of engineering. It's much closer to science really than it would be, say, to civil engineering or mechanical engineering. I always think it's the most scientific of the engineering disciplines. So we tried to merge those two disciplines into a single, unique, multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary new discipline, if you like. And that's been incredibly successful. If you go out to any of the big pharma plants around Dublin, and we're one of the biggest pharma producers in the world, you will bump into DCU graduates, both biotech and GCB. They're everywhere. We've infiltrated the entire biopharma ecosystem. But what we found over the last few years is that while biology has just kind of exploded, engineering has been left a little bit behind. So our biotech degree, we feel now, is a little bit light on the engineering side. So we're going to develop a new bioprocessing degree that will have a little bit more engineering in it. But more importantly than that, we're going to really transform, we hope, how we actually teach. So we're going to place a lot less emphasis on lectures and exams and that kind of individual just swatting away at your notes. We're going to have a lot more emphasis on projects, on challenges, on teamwork, on hackathons, all the sort of things that will prepare you better, we hope, for the world of work, but also make your 4 years in college a little bit more social, I suppose, in a good way. You won't be out on the tear all the time, but you'll actually be actively learning with your friends in teams. So we're really excited about it, and I think, a lot of you came here thinking about purely biology, but there's a lot more to biology than biology if you really want to have an impact on the world. So our biotech degree program and now our new bioprocessing program, you've got to incorporate a little bit of biochemical engineering, but it means that whatever you do in your life, you'll have a very big impact. So, and I know when I've talked to first year students over the years, it's always struck me that students really want to make an impact on the world. I always assumed people just wanted to discover new things, but in fact, when you ask students, they want to do something important. And if you're helping to produce vaccines on a massive scale or cancer drugs or whatever, it's an extremely rewarding thing to do, as well as being technically interesting. So that's why, we've a few engineers like myself lurking around in amongst the biologists, hiding in the bush, so to speak, ready to ambush you with a little bit of maths, but it's only a small bit, and it's what makes our department unique, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like the point that you made about biology. It's not just one thing. And a student might have come here today with an interest in biology. Maybe they do it in school and they're thinking, oh yeah, I like this. But really, once you get into third level, and maybe they might even come through the biological sciences general entry route to kind of try everything out and make the decision at the end as to what course they want to take, you might realize that you have an interest in something completely different than you initially thought. You'll say even like the Leaving Cert syllabus, although it's very comprehensive, you're still only dipping your toe into certain areas, and you've not been out to see how industry works or the different modules that you can do in university. So there's loads of different options in DCU. We might throw the virtual mic over to Jack for a second. Hi Jack, how are you?
Hi guys, how's it going?
I'd love to ask you, Jack, as a current DCU student, how did you make up your mind as to which course you would like to do? Assuming you had an interest in maybe science in fifth or sixth year, how did you land on DCU and genetics and cell biology in particular?
Yeah, I'd say it was kind of a mix of reasons. One reason for DCU was definitely that I come from Wexford, North Wexford, so a lot of my friends would have been wanting to go to college in Dublin. That would have definitely had an influence partly on my decision for DCU. Secondly, I knew I didn't want to do a business degree. No offense to anybody who does business, but it just wasn't my interest. And people were kind of telling me, oh, like, if you don't know what to do, it's kind of a safe option. But I remember having a massive interest in biology. That's why I didn't choose the general entry route, even though I knew that I would have to do all three in the first year.
Mm-hmm.
I had only done biology for the Leaving Cert, and I remember just there's always a couple of genetics questions on the biology syllabus for the Leaving Cert, and everybody else used to hate them and try to avoid them when they were doing them. But I actually found them very interesting. So they were a couple of reasons why I wanted to do GCB. And there was only, I think, two genetics and cell biology courses in Dublin when I was going into my first year of college. The other one was in Trinity, and that was a much bigger college and something that I wouldn't have been used to. My school wasn't very big, so DCU was kind of just the perfect fit, really.
Yeah. And genetics and cell biology, when you were doing your research in sixth year, did you know exactly the sort of careers you could get from this? Or was it more, this is what I have an interest in, I'll figure out the career side of things once I get there? Maybe you're still in that boat.
Yeah, I'd say I'm definitely not 100% sure yet, and I think that's okay. I'm not in any rush. Yeah, when I was in sixth year, I was definitely researching the course just to see what I was studying, and then trying to figure out. It's a bit of a knowledge gap, I think, between looking at the course structure and then actually trying to figure out what job you can get from what you're studying. It doesn't really explain it for you, but I suppose that's kind of part of the course in a way.
Yeah.
Because when you come in from first year to fourth year, you're not really instructed on what you should be doing. It's kind of a make your own path sort of a thing, because you have a comprehensive stuff of what you're learning. You're learning various different things throughout the 4 years. So there are many options, I feel, that you can go into industry, or if you want to go into research, you can do further studies, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that you don't have to have figured out, as you mentioned, Jack. I
No,
think
not at all.
DCU takes pride in, producing well-equipped graduates with a lot of transferable skills to kind of go into whatever area they'd like to pursue afterwards. But Sarah, you were in Jack's position not too long ago. You were a final year genetics and cell biology student, and you chose to continue in research in the area. How is that going for you? How did you think this is something you'd end up doing?
I kind of figured it out in my third year. So we go on an interplacement in third year, and the interplacements are also hugely varied. So they can be kind of an engineering-y or bioprocessing kind of inter in a big pharma company. I went into a small startup company, which was a research-based company. And that kind of, for me, led to my next couple of decisions, which was doing the research stream in fourth year. So in fourth year, you have your option to go kind of a researchy kind of based route, or you can go down more of a biopharma route in your fourth year. So I chose the research route that in fourth year, which led me to my master's in like a research master's, which then led me to my current position as a PhD research student. So I think third year and your interplacement will really give you kind of, I still didn't know. I was still very up in the air. I had an idea. So again, it's not in third year, if you don't figure it out, it's not like, loads of people didn't figure it out till a couple of months after they'd graduated. So it's you figure it out as you go. It's definitely something, if you're not sure in your third and fourth year, it's not to worry about. You get through your exams, you get through your assignments, you do all that, and you kind of figure things out as you go. So that's definitely what I did anyway. But yeah, the interplacement was huge for me. It was huge for me to get into a research company, and that kind of confirmed for me that research is where kind of I wanted to go. I didn't know where in research or how to get there, but that again is something I figured out as I went along.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic part of Intran. Maybe Jack, you'd agree if you were out, and even our academics here, you've probably seen a lot of students come through Intra. It's a fantastic way to realize what you like, but also what you dislike as well. You know, there's no harm in doing an internship and then afterwards reflecting and thinking, oh, maybe I'd actually be more interested in industry, or actually maybe it'd be research for me. I mean, you might as well figure that out during the course, as opposed to say once you've graduated and you kind of think you have to head in a certain direction. And maybe if we pass over to Tim or Keith, you have witnessed obviously a lot of students coming through all these programs as lecturers. If a student comes into one of these courses and hasn't studied biology before, is the kind of first year a nice way to catch everyone up to speed? Are there a lot of supports available for those who maybe need additional help with biology?
Well, Keith's been through it all as a DCU graduate at multiple levels, so he's best placed to answer that.
Yeah, absolutely. I can take that question. Yeah, just to kind of dwell on my own experiences. I mean, I knew in secondary school that I would have liked a career in science, but I wasn't entirely sure what that career was going to be. Like, I think if future Keith had spoken to past Keith and told him where he was going to end up, he would be utterly shocked. But that was one of the things about going to DCU. It was not just about like learning the fundamentals and things like that, but it was almost like a discovery at the same time. So like that, like I did physics and biology for the leaving cert and never done chemistry. So it was quite daunting coming into first year when you look at the curriculum that, oh, this is a new subject. This is something that I'm going to have to learn. But like that, DCU kind of primes you in how it's developed its different kind of program structures, how it's kind of developed each module to prepare the students as best they can moving forward throughout whatever degree program they decide to do. So for me, I did common entry. Like I wasn't sure which degree program I wanted to go into. So for that first year was like critical for me to kind of find out what I wanted to do and kind of catch up on things like chemistry, so that I was more informed then making that decision going forward. Now, it was difficult at first. I mean, you're going into these lectures and it's a brand new subject, but there are support structures there to help along the way. And they've evolved even more so from what they were when I went to what they are now. You know, there's clinics after school that students can attend and book in with. Students are assigned mentors, like academic members of staff that they can go to if they have any kind of trouble. There's tutorials, there's more blended learning options. It was great then, but it's even better now. So like that, there's plenty of options, resources and support available to students for anyone who's maybe daunted or sees that some of these subjects they haven't done for the leaving are now, they have to face them coming into DCU, but there's nothing to fear. Everyone's there to support them through that kind of experience.
Exactly, and that's lovely to hear, because there could be a student today, as I said, who's in sixth year, hasn't chosen to study biology, but would actually like to go into something in that area. The general rule of thumb is if it's not a requirement, you know, you'll be taught upon entry. So don't fret, you know, it will all work out. Keith, would you have any advice for maybe subjects that would come in handy? Say if we're talking to a fourth year at the minute who might be picking their subjects in a while, biology maybe is a given, but would you recommend maybe chemistry, physics, something along those lines?
It would be an added advantage, but depending on what program they want to get into, you know, I mean, whatever, even if they didn't get the choice, I mean, for me, I wanted to do chemistry for my leaving cert, but there wasn't enough students in the school to actually create that class. So I missed out on that. But DCU caught me up on that. You know, in that first year, they taught me everything that I needed to know regarding chemistry. So then when I left common entry, depending on what degree I wanted to go into, I was well armed for that. So yeah, I don't think there's a rule of thumb as to what subjects you definitely need to have, but if you're interested in doing biology in DCU, definitely do biology for the leaving cert if it's available to you. But again, if you have a more informed idea as to what type of degree you want to go into, this maybe physics will help with the engineering side of things. Maybe chemistry will help if you want to get into analytical science or environmental science. Maybe Tim or Greg have suggestions on that.
Yeah, I think it's very rare for somebody to come into any degree program having all three sciences. I mean, it's almost nobody. So everybody is playing catch up to some extent. So in that sense, it is a level playing field. And I think, as Keith said, we've recognized this issue years ago, and we've put things in place a long time ago. And we have very high completion rates in first year. You know, so there's lots of scare stories in the media about students dropping out. That doesn't tend to happen in DCU. We just, most of our students get through. The one thing I would just say while I think of it, when I've been on Zoom all day, so my brain is slowing down a bit, but when I've talked to students out in schools over the years, there's often a feeling that if you do a science degree, you're going to end up working with a white coat and goggles on for the rest of your life at the bench. And in fact, I think some of the students out there will be surprised to hear that most scientists end up working in an office, or they could be doing anything. And even this week, I've had conversations with biotech graduates. One is finishing medicine. He went on to do graduate entry medicine down in Limerick. Another is one of our stellar graduates. She went on to do a PhD in Cambridge. Others, I was talking to one of my students last week, and he's in the area of quality control in the biopharma industry. So the number of careers that are possible, there's an increasing number of students actually who want to do business qualifications after their science, which is often a nice combination. So, don't think that a science degree means that you're going to be, as I said, in that white coat for the rest of your life. It's only a starting point. And it's also, I think it's really important, because when I used to teach first year a few years ago, I used to ask students what kind of scientist they'd like to be. And a lot of people had that image of the person in the white coat, and students didn't realize that they could do teaching, or they could maybe do a degree in computing afterwards. So it's the possibilities are endless really with any kind of technical degree, because as you said, Sinead, it gives you a whole series of skills that transfer. And in fact, if you go out and talk to employers nowadays, they don't ask you, they don't say, what immunology do you know? They ask you, well, they usually say things like, they want somebody with a good head on their shoulders. They would just want a capable kind of person who has general skills in communication and all that sort of stuff. So what I would say to students out there is get involved in as many kind of extracurricular things as you can, just to build up these kind of skills as well, because they're going to be just as important as all the technical stuff in the long term.
Absolutely, that's a great point, Greg, especially with employers. Often it's not what exact grade did you get in that exam. It's, oh, have you worked on a team before, or a project or something like this? And through the internships that Sarah was mentioning, you have that experience as a graduate, which can put you leaps and bounds ahead of people who don't have that. It's great to hear there's really loads of different career opportunities. There's different way into the courses. Tim, we might come to you in terms of like some cool modules that we study in DCU, because a question for students is often, okay, I want to do this course in DCU. What do these modules mean? What sort of things am I going to study? Would you be able to give your 2 cents on that?
Sure. As the others mentioned, we start with kind of a wide baseline in first year, but then in third and fourth year we have more specialized modules. And Greg gave examples there at the start, talking about vaccine production as being a key one, especially at the biotechnology, bioprocessing end. They want to think about how biological molecules like that can be produced and then synthesized and used to have impact on people's lives. And in the same way, I teach one specialized one on pathogen genomics in third year. And we study how bacteria and viruses and parasites can infect people, and how their genetic variation is really important. And if we look at the vaccine example, step one for developing a vaccine is to decode whatever it is that is infecting you, and to decode its DNA, determine its DNA sequence, look at the A, C, Gs, and Ts, and figure that out, and try to understand its variation, its genetic variation, and understand its evolution as well. And as we've seen over the past year and a half, that is very, very important. And that's something we incorporate into our degree, that we analyze, existing real world problems, but also understand the fundamentals behind the theory about how we can tackle them. So the students may not be able to act on SARS-CoV-2 right now, but when the next big coronavirus pandemic, which will occur in a few years' time, emerges, then they will be equipped to tackle that better then. And I know Sarah and others are already tackling that problem.
Thanks in advance, Sarah, for saving the world in a couple of years' time. That's really cool, Tim. Do you notice that there's like great feedback from these modules, because they're real kind of real world issues that students are learning about, as opposed to just something in a textbook that they'll never kind of come across? Very kind of practical, hands-on learning.
Yeah, well, there's a balance, as always, that you want to mix the practical with the theory, and
yeah.
A lot of the creativity for problem solving comes from the basic knowledge of, say, coronaviruses, and that's been developed when you look at the SARS-1 outbreak. All those years ago, MERS outbreaks were continually happening. All the vaccine development and the knowledge from that era has meant is the reason why the companies were able to develop much more rapidly now appropriate vaccines that are effective. Without that prior work over the previous 2 decades, we wouldn't be where we are now. So it's really important to understand the history and the kind of the molecular biology of how the viruses can affect people, how they behave, how we can produce antibodies and so on to actually tackle these problems. So it's a mixture of trying to tackle real world problems that exist around us, but also understand from a wide range of scientific approaches how we can best address them.
Exactly, because as you said, you need to be armed with that knowledge in order to address the problem at hand. And I think it goes without saying that DC will absolutely make sure that you have those two, very basic sets of skills. You know, the knowledge, you also have the kind of problem solving and critical thinking ability to actually go on and make changes or new discoveries, as you mentioned. Sarah and Jack might pop in for a second. Can you recall any really cool projects that you worked on, that you were doing it and you're thinking, this is actually mental, that I am doing this in college, still a student, but managing to do these really cool like research projects or practicals?
Yeah, I'll go first. There's definitely been a few modules over the years that have involved those kind of cool projects as you've described. So in first year, we would have done these group work modules and we would have tackled different topics every week. So they would have been environmentally based, and then so something on climate change maybe, and then so stuff that's really broad. And then the next week there would have been a biological topic, and then the next week there would have been a chemical topic. So because we all share the same lectures and same modules in first years with all the other common entry students that don't know what they want to study yet, those were really helpful, and they were really interesting just because I never imagined that I'd be sitting with a physicist, a chemist, or an aspiring chemist and physicist, and then discussing the same topic.
Yeah.
And then in second year was kind of our first big project, and I did mine on gene therapy in hemophilia, I think. And I just couldn't have imagined that I'd be studying something that seemed so complex to me a couple of years beforehand. But it actually seemed doable now because of the support that I was getting from around me. And then now recently I've just finished the practical pieces of my fourth year research projects on calcium channels in cancer. So that was a really interesting topic. And Tim is actually my supervisor for that. And we've had a wild couple of months trying to figure out our results and findings. And it's been challenging, especially this year, but it's definitely been one of the most interesting things that I've done in the 4 years.
Mm-hmm. I think that's so exciting for a prospective student to hear, if someone is in sixth year thinking, I might be good at biology in school, but I can't imagine ever doing something like that. I'm sure you thought the same thing, Jack, and then all of a sudden you're in final year, you've done 4 years of the course and you have this knowledge now, and it happens so gradually, it's not just all of a sudden you have it. You kind of reflect and go, oh my God, I can't believe that's me, I'm doing all this stuff. Sarah, what about you? Can you recall anything? Maybe you've done similar modules to Jack.
So all my fourth year project and my master's project and my current PhD research they are all based on the same thing, and they're based on screening single cells to identify antibodies against patient tumors or patient. At the minute we're looking at SARS-CoV-2, so we're trying to identify good antibodies against SARS-CoV-2, and it'll be on cancer in the future. But I just like to say that the modules that I have done in my undergraduate, in my master's degree, they have been all so applicable to what I do in the real world. So I focus mainly on immunology. That's my kind of area that I'm working in, is immunology. But I need to use molecular biology. I need to use genetics. I need to use I really do need to use all the topics that I learned in undergraduate and postgraduate. So they really are applicable to what you will do in the future. Even if you're focused in one area, you're going to pull bits from everywhere, all the things that you have learned, because you will use them, or you'll need to find someone who can help you use them. Or so they really are, they are useful is what they are. They do lend themselves to you when you are working in the real world. So
Yeah, you're not a one-trick pony upon
Yeah,
leaving DCU.
exactly.
You know, you're not pigeonholed into one particular area. You know, fantastic. And I know that's especially the point of the DCU Futures project, Greg, is you know, creating a graduate for the future almost, and making sure that there are these like transversal skills that can really take our graduates, you know, wherever they need to go.
Absolutely. Yeah, there are a whole range of skills that really cut across all kinds of industries. I mean, one of the things you'll find when you go out to the workplace is that you'll see things in a brewery, for example, that are the exact same as things in a biopharma plant. So if you focus more on, I suppose, basic skills like IT skills, like data analysis, all those kind of things, it makes you as a graduate very adaptable so that you can go into any kind of industry. So rather than focusing all your energies on learning bucket loads about one specific industry, if you learn skills that transfer across, then that is a real advantage for you in your career. Just on kind of fun modules, one of the things our biotech and our GCB students do in fourth year is they make beer. So we had, and at the moment we have, our next year we're going to have a design a beer competition. And it's not just having a party, it's the fact that, you know, brewing is a big business. And there's a lot of our biotech graduates in particular have gone on to become brewers and have been very successful in both the big companies and in the microbreweries. So that is one particular module. And we have essentially what I think it's the best facility in the country, what we call our microbial bioprocessing facility, which has been funded recently. So we have an outstanding environment that kind of mimics the real world, in the sense that we're using equipment that is at a scale that you won't find in any other university in the country.
Yeah, fantastic for our graduates to have experience with those pieces of machinery and equipment. You know, I mean, I can imagine that makes the transition into industry and into working considerably smoother.
Absolutely. I mean, even to have seen the equipment once, and certainly when I talk to students out on Intra, and you know, the students out there, our Intra is 9 months long. So that's our student placement, and it's a huge chunk of time in somebody of that age, and in terms of their 4-year degree program. And they all remark on how the fact that they've seen that type of environment in DCU makes that transition a little bit easier. And I think in some universities, a biology graduate or any type of graduate may not ever have seen a piece of equipment that looks like what you get in the real world. Whereas we've invested in that in the last few years. Well, we've always had it, but we've made a major investment because it is so important, because big things behave differently than little things, essentially. So again, that's the whole real world aspect of the education we want to offer.
Yeah, I can't imagine the shock going out into one of these companies if you've never seen this huge piece of equipment before and going, oh, how am I even going to tackle it? So as you said, Greg, even just to have witnessed it before in person is helpful.
Absolutely, because, you know, a lecturer might draw a piece of equipment as a little box on the board and with a little paddle inside, but when you actually see the real thing, it's full of pipes and wires and instruments, and it's much more complicated. So it's nice to have just seen it, even if you don't understand all the intricacies. So that's one of the things we've always tried to do is give students that element of actually just working with larger scale equipment.
Like industry standard, and that's across a lot of our courses in DCU, even stepping away from science for a second. You know, we've new engineering labs. If you're interested in communications, you know, we've radio studios, television studios. You know, there's a lot on campus for you to really get experience in before you leave. Just for anyone who's joined the call, as we kind of head towards the end of our panel discussion, please do use that Q&A function if you do want to ask our panelists anything. They'd be more than happy to cover it before the time is out. Keith, I know that you can talk about going from a degree all the way up to PhD. And again, for a student watching today, that might seem like an impossible feat. How are they ever going to get there? Would you be able to kind of talk through, you know, the kind of process that they could go through to get to maybe doing research in biology?
Yeah, sure. I mean, like when I joined DCU, I didn't really have a clear idea as to where I wanted to go career-wise. As I said, I wanted to do science, but I don't think I really had a great appreciation for just how diverse science could be at that stage. You know, going into DCU first year, you've got your physics, chemistry, biology, and maths, you know, but as you migrate through the program, you know, you really get your eyes opened to just the career choices that are ahead of you. And one thing with DCU that I really credit them for me personally, was like I learned an awful lot of the core principles and the kind of key fundamentals that you would need within a degree program, but there was also a lot of like discovery and kind of you know, the kind of soft skills, kind of getting exposure to different things that kind of help you decide what you like and what you don't like moving forward. And like in combination with that through your first and second year, by the time you kind of get to third year, when you're going on your intra placement, you kind of have a better idea as to what kind of work placement you'd like to go for, whether DCU offers that through the network they have or you arrange it yourself. By that point, you kind of have a more informed opinion of that. So like that at that time, like I kind of like the research element of it, and I ended up getting a placement in the state laboratory where I spent the 9 months. So I got a lot of hands-on experience there, like using an awful lot of apparatus that I would have used in the undergraduate labs in DCU. And like that, like I had some really good conversations out there, got some really good input from the people who worked out there in advance of going into fourth year, which was my final year project. And like that, I was able to make an informed decision based on my final year project then. So by the end of fourth year, I kind of had this experience in kind of the industry side of things and research side of things with the state laboratory, but I also had a pure research driven experience with the final year project. And it was the kind of thing halfway through the fourth year, I kind of realized I really, really enjoyed research. I kind of wanted to give that a go. And the support structures were there to help me pursue it. You know, DCU was very keen on kind of helping their undergraduates kind of achieve or get where they want to be.
Yeah.
And for me, like it was attending of workshops to be able to write grants. You know, there's in first year, I never even heard of the IRC, but by fourth year, I was writing a 60-page grant application to be able to work on a project that I now knew after 4 years that I kind of maybe wanted to base a career around. So like that, I wouldn't have been able to do that without the support structures that were there in DCU. Like they helped me discover where I wanted to go and they helped me get there at the same time. So yeah. That's
so
it
doesn't necessarily have to be like a daunting task, I suppose, is what you're saying to people. You know, if they do want to end up going into research, there's support there to help you do that. It's not just something you do, you know, and no one wants to get involved and help you through it. As you said, there's webinars and things to help you. Yeah,
there's support structures for every career that you want to get into. I mean, like I still have friends from my degree program, from my PhD experience and stuff like that. And when I look and see where it's taken them across the world into different kind of career choices, it's unbelievably diverse where we've all ended up. And, you know, a lot of people would credit what DCU did for them to kind of get them where they wanted to be. So yes, I'm in research and now I'm like in an academic position where I'm teaching the next generation. Some of my friends are in breweries, some of my friends are in sales, some of my friends are in policy making. I mean, I could talk at length at where all my friends have ended up, but like that, DCU helped them discover where they wanted to go and gave them the skills to get there. So
that's great to hear. We have a couple of questions come in the Q&A box. I'm not sure if our panelists can see them, but I will read them out. And again, hop in if you think you can answer the question. So someone has asked, does biomedical engineering focus on mechanics or is it just biology and physics?
Yeah, the biomechanical engineering tends to be something that focuses on things like physiology, artificial limbs, but also medical devices, those kind of things. So it would be quite a different thing really to biotechnology, really. But that said, it's a very good option. I mean, Ireland has a very strong track record in the whole area of medical devices. What's the company over in Galway? Huge employer over in Galway. I can't think of their name offhand, but certainly Medtronics, yeah. So all sorts of medical devices. That would be the kind of thing that biomechanical engineers would do.
That's great. Thank you, Greg. Hope that question's answered. If anyone has a follow-up, just pop it in the Q&A. Someone asked, will the general entry to biological sciences be similar to other biology courses as it's not yet determined? Would someone like to hop in and explain kind of how that's going to work?
Yeah, I can do that because I'll be chairing that. Look, the reality is that most first-year science programs around the country are broadly the same because, you know, you have to do physics, chemistry, biology, maths, and maybe a bit of computing or whatever. And our first-year general entry is settled. You'll do the same chemistry as the other degree programs, the same physics. You'll do a slightly different maths course than the other programs, but otherwise it's the same. And I mean, so there are good aspects and bad aspects to that because the classes can be big, and we try our best to try and create little cohorts and offer modules where you're in smaller groups. But really, first year is something you've just got to get through, you know, to build up your skills to move on to the tougher stuff, no matter where you go, you know. So there's no escaping chemistry, for example. You'll have to do chemistry and or physics even. But there's good reason for that, because biology is fundamentally chemistry, really, when you think about it.
Yeah, thank you for that, Greg. Someone has asked if anyone has some information on environmental science and tech. You know, because obviously there's some biology involved in that course. Would anyone be able to give a couple of sentences about that?
Yeah, I can help there. Well, that degree is kind of shared between the three schools of biotechnology, chemical sciences, and physics, because that's kind of a real kind of scientist role, and that's increasingly important, as you know, for looking at environmental science, and particularly is focused on key societal challenges that we have, like things like climate justice, biodiversity decline, pollution, and how we can mitigate those using a range of different approaches. So the students would have really great experiences within biology and chemistry and physics in terms of understanding how best to tackle those from those different approaches. And then they would also be able to specialize more in one of those three areas as they go through their degree. So it's kind of a flexible degree that you get more choice as you go through, but also shares the common first year modules across a lot of the different other degrees. And it's worth emphasizing that even at first year, we do start off with slightly different selection of modules, depending which degree you choose. That if you do biotechnology and bioprocessing, there's a stronger emphasis on maths. Whereas in the genetics and cell biology degree, we start them learning about applied biostats and coding from day one, because that's really important now in biology, that everything involves some element of data visualization and data manipulation. And understanding that is really excellent for these students, because irrespective of what they want to do later, coding is a very transferable skill. It's one of these key attributes that can be applied to a wide range of areas. And we have invested very strongly in trying to make sure that our students in the genetics and cell biology degree really can do computational biology as well as molecular biology, and can link them together. And that will be really, really important as our understanding and our use of computer-based approaches expands.
That's great. Thank you so much, Tim, for that. Just as we come into like the last couple of minutes, please do send in any Q&As that we can get, grab our panelists before they go off and enjoy the rest of their evening. But anyone can hop in here, I'll open it up to the floor. Any advice for a student who is thinking about entering DCU for biology, whatever course, whether that's advice for being a sixth year, you know, as a first year coming into college, or just something to carry with them throughout the course? I'll open the floor.
I think if I could give one piece of advice, it would be that there are going to be parts of courses, no matter what course, scientific or not, that you will find more difficult than other parts, but it's really important to ask for help, because for me, my struggle was chemistry. I'd never done it before. I'd avoided it as much as I possibly could. And then it came to a point where I couldn't avoid it anymore. And I let myself struggle for a while. And I got the help. I got grinds. I went to lecturers. I asked people for help. And as soon as I got that help, it made my life so much easier. I didn't have to struggle anymore. If I had asked for that help a couple of weeks before, or whatever it was, a couple of months before, it really would have stood to me. Now, I did ask for the help in the end, and it really did make such a difference. But if I could give any advice, ask for the help when you need it. Your lecturers are there to help you. Your lab demonstrators are there to help you, and they will help you. So if you are struggling with something, or if there's parts of the course you don't like, look for the help, and it is definitely there for you.
Yeah, you just need to ask. Yeah, that's often the hardest part, isn't it? Is to go, I'm actually finding this a bit difficult, but once it's out there, you get the help needed. Anyone else want to hop in with anything?
Yeah, similar to what Sarah said, I think my struggle was physics. I'd never done it before, and it's just saying exactly what she said. Once I asked for the help, and once I actually stopped ignoring that, you know, I have to do this, and it actually did make it more easier. And then before I knew it, the year was over, and although physics is not my interest, I never had to do it again. So, and one other piece of advice I would have, that if you are going to choose as a course in science in DCU, make sure that you are looking at the course structure and that you have an interest, some sort of an interest, because it really does help, and it will make what you're doing seem more interesting if you have an interest in it.
Absolutely. And again, that's advice that can be applied across the board, no matter what course you might be looking at in university. Take a look at the modules, see if there's an internship, see if it's the kind of thing you're interested in, and that will make the experience so much more enjoyable. We do just have one question that's come in there before you finish up. Someone said, is the maths involved similar to volumetric analysis, etc.? What I already do as a chemistry and biology student in secondary school. So that's kind of the maths side of things.
The maths in first year will be, well, there are certain things you just have to know, like you have to know algebra, you have to know coordinate geometry, and to use the dreaded C word, you'll have to know a bit of calculus, because calculus is kind of the natural language in many ways of the natural world. But again, and this is something that I think DCU prides itself on, and we're looking at this in the maths department, that we understand that people come in with varying abilities in maths. I mean, you'll get people coming into biology, they might have a H1 in honours maths, and then you get somebody with a H5. So we understand that, and the maths department are putting in a lot of effort this year in particular, so that next year's classes, there'll be a lot of what's called adaptive learning, where you kind of work through the problems and the new concepts, and you have to keep getting over little hurdles. So it kind of trains you every step of the way along with the maths. So it's going to be a very supportive way of learning maths. And one of the good things about maths and engineering, I suppose, and students learn this quite early on, is that if you can get to grips with something like maths or engineering, you can actually get 100% in an exam, whereas it's very tough to get 100 in biology. And I've noticed that with our very astute students, that they will say, actually, this stuff is not as hard as people think. And if I really put in a little bit of work, I can be averaging really high marks in these modules. So, the fear of maths, I think, is a shame, because it's potentially something that a lot of people can excel on. But as I said, the maths department this year are going to totally review how they teach maths this year. So they're using a different type of approach, where it'll be very personalized towards individuals, and rather than just throwing the stuff out at the whole class.
Yeah, absolutely. And not to mention, I think this has been brought up every week, but the Maths Learning Centre is an incredible facility that we have in DCU. And for those of you who aren't aware, it's located in our Glasnevin library, and it is essentially a maths centre where there are tutors there. I don't know what the times are, but most days, every day, and are available there to, help students out with any of their problems. It's free service. You just walk in and ask for some assistance. So even the comfort of knowing that exists is lovely for people who, as you said, might have a fear of maths, fear of calculus. And, it's a nice kind of easy way. It's not confrontational, it's just, oh yeah, let me help you with your problem, and you get through it in that way.
It's also worth saying, Sinead, as well, there's probably a lot of students out there and English is not their first language, and we have a really fantastic writing centre as well.
Yes.
So that people who are struggling writing, because again, writing is such an important skill in so many jobs. And certainly I've had students go to the writing centre and they found it fantastic. So, no matter what your weakness is, there is some resource there in DCU to help you.
Exactly. As I said, academic writing can differ from the writing you might be doing for leaving cert. So again, it's a new skill that you're learning upon entry, but support's there. And, DC is well established at this stage. There is the problem it hasn't seen, I'd say, in terms of students coming in, not understanding certain subject areas. So there are certainly, supports available there for all of our students. And again, this isn't just biology related across any of our courses. We will just finish up now because it's coming up to the 6 o'clock mark. There are no more question and answers coming in. If you do have a last minute one, throw it in there quick and we'll try and get it answered. But thank you so much to our panelists who joined us today, took an hour out of their day to chat to our prospective students. Hopefully, you're able to make a decision about where you might like to go to university. I think it was a very insightful discussion in terms of internships, careers, modules, biology in the real world, and all the opportunities that are there. If you are watching this back on record, you can contact studenthelp@dcu.ie if you do have any questions that you obviously couldn't answer live. And if you do want to ask our panelists something in particular, I'll be able to forward the query on, and they might have a minute to write back to you in their day. But thank you very, very much for coming. We had a great attendance today. As I said, this will go up on the internet so that you guys could watch it back if you need to. Huge thank you to our panelists again. Have a fantastic Easter break. I hope everyone gets a lovely Easter egg and has loads of chocolate. And thank you very much, and we will see you next week.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks very much. See you guys. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.